All right, so today we're going to fast forward a lot. So we're going from Plato and Aristotle and a little bit of logic last week, and we're focusing still on the justification portion of knowledge. We're going to fast forward to the Enlightenment, the early 1600s. So we're going from ancient Greece to early 1600s. What happens in the interim, we'll cover a lot of that when we turn to the belief portion of justified true belief. It was kind of the rise of the church, Catholicism, and Islam. And so it was a lot of God talk, which kind of plays into the belief stuff I'll talk about in a few weeks. And so it's really not until the early 1600s that kind of the shackles of the church start to get shaken off, that it's okay to think about things that don't have to do with God. And so we'll see today René Descartes, trained mathematician, and in a few weeks then we'll see Blaise Pascal, a contemporary of Descartes, also a trained mathematician. And so math is going to have, again, this odd special place in the history of philosophy. So we get this mathematician, René Descartes, and he's curious about knowledge itself, right? This is epistemology. How do we know what we know? Is knowledge a thing? And he sees some dripping wax, and he wonders about permanence and so forth. And he begins to doubt. And so Descartes is primarily known for his doubt, Cartesian doubt. And we'll see maybe it's legitimate doubt, maybe it's not, but for the time being, let's presume this legitimate doubt. And he's wondering, how do I know anything? That in order to have knowledge, what I need to do, from René Descartes, is I need to find that thing that I can be absolutely 100% certain of. That's what I build. That's what I can build knowledge on. I got to find that foundation stone, that cornerstone that I can build everything else upon. And so if I can doubt it, then that can't be it, right? And so he begins with the senses. And this we've seen before. We've seen it with Aristotle. We've seen it with Plato. Plato doubts the senses. We have to move beyond the senses, get to this transcendental soul thing that somehow understands and perceives the body, the world of the senses is a prison house for this soul. Aristotle then thinks, no, the senses are the best way that we have to access the world around us and to get to truths. Right? We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. And so René Descartes also going to start with the world of the senses. And he's going to say, look, usually the senses are pretty reliable, but on occasion they give me misinformation. And just like I couldn't place 100% confidence in everything told to me by a friend who I know lied to me once, I can't put 100% certainty in the world of the senses because I know they have deceived me. They've been wrong at least once, if not a couple of times, if not a few times. So surely senses are not where it's at. Okay? So he dismisses senses as the building block, the foundation, or the cornerstone of knowledge. Okay? Well, if it's not the senses, then I wonder what it could be. So again, he's trying to think about things that he's 100% sure and certain of. And so he moves from the world of the senses to, well, okay, maybe if I can be sure that I'm awake instead of dreaming, that'll somehow help me. And this is the early 1600s again. He's trying to figure out, how is it that I know for sure and certain, 100% certainty? How can I be guaranteed that when I think I'm awake, I actually am? And when I think I'm asleep, I actually am? That's a tough one, especially since we've already dismissed the world of the senses. So you can't get at it through the senses. It's not like dreams just feel different or awaking feels different, because that's a sense. And we've already called those into question. And so then that reminds me of the movie Inception, which kind of deals with this same issue. And I also wonder about people who have very, very vivid dreams. While they're in the dream, it seems real. They are not aware that it is a dream, that dream world is reality. In just the same way that if you presume, and I'm using that word intentionally here, presume that you are awake, you just kind of somehow know. Wake and dream are so intertwined and interconnected, right? That your dreams take things from reality. Right? That's what your dreams have to work with. And your dream life does then affect your real life, right? If you have nightmares or something along those lines, when you wake up, you may not be as well rested. You may have a little sense of fear or uncertainty, like, whoa, maybe that dream was real, right? You call the person who may have been affected by the events of the dream. Are you okay? Are you all right? Because I just had this weird dream, right? We presume these things to be connected. It gets really complicated because some might say, well, you can tell dreams from reality because in reality, you're in control of your own actions. Whereas in the dream, it seems that things just kind of happen to you. You're not really in control. We talked before about people who, in reality, take themselves to be victims, which complicates that distinction. But furthermore, you also have these folks who are aware that they're in a dream and then begin to make decisions within the dream, lucid dreaming, right? Now, this is a fairly new development, a fairly new thing where people lucidly dream. And so that complicates things even more, right? Because now within even the dream, I'm making decisions, conscious choices in the dream to do this, to do that, to do something else. And some research, again, the research on this is very, very new because this phenomena is very new, at least reported. That some research indicates that lucid dreaming is not healthy because you're not resting, right? What your body and mind require is rest. That's when your subconscious and unconscious take over, the REM, the dream cycle, so on and so forth. But if you're taking over, then there is no subconscious, unconscious doing anything. It's still the conscious you. So the conscious you doesn't actually get to rest. And so the distinction between dream and reality becomes even more enmeshed and more complicated for these folks, and their rest is not restful at all. So then when they are awake, they're sort of, in a literal sense, sleepwalking through life. We've talked before about metaphorical sleepwalking. They're kind of literally sleepwalking through life. And so it's as if reality, the awake time, actually is somewhat more dreamlike, and their dream life is somewhat more real life awake-like. So it gets really complicated really quickly. Of course, we can talk about things like dream analysis, right? That your dreams do give some insight into what's happening in the awake world. In the movie Inception, I think it's the Leonardo DiCaprio character, ask one of the other characters to prove that they're in a dream. To prove they're in a dream, says, how did we get here? And if you can't remember how you got there, then that's proof that it's a dream. Because in reality, you can stop and think, oh yeah, I got up, I got my shower, I got dressed, I got into the car, I drove here, here's the route I took. You don't typically, but you could bring that to consciousness. You could bring that so that it's present to your consciousness. Go back to presence and absence from Derrida and Heidegger. Whereas in the dream world, things just occur. You just show up here, show up there, show up there. The laws of physics don't really apply either in the dream world, right? You can fly, or you can do this, you can do that. Whereas in awake world, you can't. But again, maybe we've got the whole thing flipped around. Think about from the book of Mencius in Eastern philosophy or Eastern thought. There's the story of the man dreaming that he's a butterfly. And then butterfly dreaming that he's a man. So he doesn't know, wait, am I a man who's dreaming I'm a butterfly? Or I'm actually a butterfly dreaming that I'm a man. When am I awake and when am I dreaming? Because they seem equally as real. That's a tough one. That's real tough. I'm sure we've probably all had experiences where, we think we're awake. We think we've awoken from a dream state to realize, oh, shoot, no, this is still a dream too. Like we don't realize that we're dreaming until we have the awake experience to draw the contrast. Real complicated. And so if at least once, if ever, we have thought, I'm awake when really it turns out in retrospect it was a dream, then we can't be sure of that either. We're looking for something we can be 100% sure and certain of every single time. Whether I'm awake or asleep isn't it. And of course, there's that weird in-between stage too, right? Where you're sort of awake but sort of asleep, right? Maybe your eyes are closed, you're beginning to doze off, but whatever's happening in the real awake world is still seeping in, right? So you think you're still listening, you think you're still taking notes, you think you're still reading, you think you're still watching, and then suddenly you realize, oh shucks, I'm not. When you're awake and when you're sleeping. That's a tough one too. So we got to dismiss that. So Descartes then, remember he's a mathematician, thinks, okay, so I got to find something then that it won't matter if I'm awake or asleep, right? Now, granted, at some points in time you're awake, and at other points in time you're asleep. You must be both, right? Because again, the dreams use reality. If you're never awake, your dreams have nothing to work from. Which, side note here, if you find that you're having reoccurring dreams, perhaps it's because you're having a reoccurring waking life. There's no new input. There's nothing new for the dream world to work on, so it's just got to work on the same stuff over and over. I don't know. So he thinks, okay, I got to find something that whether I'm awake or asleep, I can be certain of. Is there anything that is unmutable, even in the dream world? Right? So laws of physics I can kind of play fast and loose with sometimes, whether I'm in control or not in control. But there is something, Descartes thinks, that is necessarily the case, whether you're awake or asleep. Math. And so notice here, Descartes is sort of walking us back through Plato's divided line, right? We start with the world of the senses. We move one step beyond that, senses plus mind. The mind is the one trying to figure out, wait, am I awake or asleep, right? Then we move to the world of mathematical objects. You cannot, even in your dreams, have a four-sided triangle. Now, you can name it whatever you want to name it in your dreams. You have complete freedom over that. But conceptually, that four-sided figure is not a triangle, even if you call it a triangle in your dream. That four-sided figure does not have three sides and three angles that add up to 180. The definition of a triangle. You can name stuff whatever you want. You can't have a squared circle. Yeah, I know the boxing ring is called that, whatever. You can't have a squared circle. You have circles, you have squares. These are two different things, even when you're asleep. Notice these also have the added advantage of being objective rather than subjective. That's why you don't have control over them. That's why you can't change them, even in your dreams. Because it's not up to you. Your senses are up to you. To some extent, right? They're your senses. You're the one experiencing the thing, right? You're the one trying to determine whether I'm awake or asleep. But as far as triangles, having three sides and three angles that add up to 180, that's not on you. It's an objective thing. Remember the intelligible realm for Plato. Objective truth, capital T, right? Everyone can get there and understand intellectually those things. And Descartes' a man of intellect. He's a mathematician. Descartes' not going to give us some allegory or some poem or some story. He's a mathematician. He's also not going to be talking about the soul because he's a mathematician. Soul talk is for artists, right? You go to the art museum and something awakens your soul. Or you read a story and it sticks with you because it awakened your soul. Mathematics doesn't awaken souls, man. It just doesn't. That's part of the objectiveness of it. Everyone can agree on the objective nature of mathematics. It's got nothing to do with me, nothing to do with speaking to my soul. Pi is 22/7, period. Done. End of story. Doesn't matter how I feel about it. We talked about that before when we talked about Plato and the divided line. So math, maybe that's the answer. And it would make sense. A mathematician would think that math is the answer, the building block, the foundation, the cornerstone of all knowledge. It's objective. It doesn't change whether I'm awake or asleep. It has nothing to do with my senses, which we talked about with Plato as well. I don't need to have a sensory experience of a triangle to know truths about triangles. But here's the thing. And this is going to be an odd connection. Descartes is going to combine, and remember this is the early 1600s, we're still coming out of the time of excommunications, book burnings, so on and so forth, right? So in order for your idea to be heard, you still have to be at least somewhat loosely affiliated with some type of church establishment, Catholicism, Islam, something along those lines. Those are the two big ones of this time period. So he makes the seemingly odd connection between mathematics and God. Seemingly odd, but not really. When we talk about God, the concept of God, and we'll talk more about this when we turn to the belief stuff. When we talk about the concept of God, almost every concept of God includes these things: creator, sustainer, destroyer. Now, sometimes they're different entities, sometimes they're one and the same entity, whatever. Create, sustain, destroy. They're at the beginning, whenever that was, to make everything. Still around, making sure stuff is still existing, making sure that the laws of physics are actual laws that don't change, making sure that triangles still have three sides and three angles that add up to 180. And destroyer. At some point, the end will come and God will be there and destroy the thing. Okay? Possibly then to recreate whatever, who knows. Okay. This sustainer aspect is tied to mathematics. We can only be sure and certain of the truths of mathematics if there is something ensuring that they remain true all of the time, everywhere. That pi continues to be 22/7. Can't be up to us. We change all the time. Ta-da. God. So the sustaining aspect of God is what ensures the truths of mathematics. But herein lies the problem. God can be doubted, right? The existence of God is not something that's 100% certain. Even to someone who chooses to believe, again, this is why all this stuff sort of ties together: the justification, the truth, and the belief. I'm trying to focus on the justification part, but in order to talk about that, I've also got to talk about the truth and the belief part, at least somewhat, right? I laid the groundwork for the truth stuff. The belief stuff is coming, but I'm also sort of planting seeds for that discussion, which is going to come later. So this justification thing, right? The senses aren't enough justification. Whether I'm awake or asleep, not enough justification. Mathematics and this God thing, really not enough justification for it to be 100% certain. That's what we're looking for, really, is we're looking for enough justification that I can be 100% certain of something. I've got to have the justification to be assured of the certainty of the truth. That's the beginning of knowledge. Then I can believe that after I've got the truth and the justification, then I can choose to believe, bam, now I've got knowledge. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to peel away the layers here of knowledge itself. That's what Descartes is trying to do with this doubt. By doubting this, not enough justification. Doubting this, not enough justification. Doubting this, not enough justification. There's too much doubt. It goes beyond a reasonable amount of doubt. So I can't be sure of that. I can't be sure of that. I can't be sure of that. It goes beyond a reasonable amount of doubt. God or no God. And maybe, and so if you've seen The Matrix, this part's going to seem super familiar to you. Maybe I'm being deceived. Maybe there's some malevolent being, not a benevolent being, but a malevolent being. Maybe there's an evil demon, all-powerful, who's deceiving me, who's making me think 2 + 2 = 4, when in reality it does not. That is at least possible. How do I know it's possible? Because I can conceive of it. Anything that is conceivable is possible. If it's conceivable, it's possible. Think about science fiction, right? Think about the classic Twilight Zone episodes, for instance. All of those are reasonable. reasonable because you can reason them. Someone came up with those ideas. Someone was able to conceive of those concepts. Therefore, it is possible. Probable? No. No. Possible. That's all. Just possible. If it's possible, then it means it's not 100% certain in the reverse. If you can conceive of the Earth stopping its rotation, that's conceivable. Highly improbable, but possible. Possible. And that's all you need to poke a hole in certainty is possible. Again, the defense attorney poking a hole in certainty. Possible. But isn't it possible that my client wasn't there? Isn't it possible? Isn't it possible? Isn't it possible? Boom. You blow the whole thing up. And we're trying to find something that can't be blown up. And so Descartes then, and this is all from Meditations on First Philosophy, which is daily meditations for a period of 6 days. They're kind of 6 chapters, if you will. And this is all occurring in chapter 1. The doubt all happens in chapter 1. And it gets to be late. And so this is from the excerpt from part 1 of our textbook here. So this is around page 24. This is, again, day 1. He's doubting that knowledge is possible. He's doubting that there is anything that I can be 100% certain of. I'm finally compelled to admit that there is not one of my former beliefs about which a doubt may not properly be raised. I can doubt everything. We call this excessive skepticism, the doubting of everything. And we talked about this previously. The excessive skeptic is going to die of exhaustion, mental and intellectual exhaustion. But it's not enough merely to have noticed this. I must make an effort to remember my habitual opinions keep coming back. Habitual opinions, not knowledge, opinions keep coming back. Habitual opinions. The stuff that I've always held on to, I continue to hold on to out of habit, just like we talked about with Plato. Right? The prisoner who's newly free is going to hang on to the previously held concepts. Why? Because they've always held on to them. Habits are tough to break, man. But all you have is opinion because some of that stuff ain't true. And you may not even have justification for it either. At best, an opinion's a justified belief. At worst, it's just a belief that doesn't even have justification. My habitual opinions keep coming back, and despite my wishes, they capture my belief. Capture my belief. Have these highly probable. I will suppose, therefore, that not God, who is supremely good and the source of truth, but rather some malicious demon of the utmost power and cunning has employed all his energies in order to deceive me. Possible. It's conceivable. Highly improbable, because that's another thing here, is as we doubt, the level of doubt decreases somewhat. Right? So the thing that's the most obvious to doubt, the senses. Those are the things that are the least reliable. Whether I'm awake or asleep, a bit more reliable, still doubtable, but not as doubtable as the senses. Math and God. Doubtable, not as doubtable as whether I'm awake or asleep, or the world of the senses. A little more reliable, but still not 100% reliable. And so we'll see once we rebuild, because right now we're deconstructing. We're tearing apart knowledge. We're doubting. But we're going to find something. Descartes' going to find something that we can build everything else from. Again, this deconstruction, reconstruction thing that I've talked about since, I think, probably the first or second day of class. Right? The demolition project really is the easy part. It's the rebuild that's tough. But what's going to happen is he's going to rebuild and he's going to go backwards. Obviously. Right? The last things that you doubt are the things that were closer to certainty. So when you're rebuilding from certainty, these are going to be closer to certainty than the other things. So it's going to be a mirror. We're going to work in reverse. but it's getting late. And you can imagine how mentally exhausting this would have been to go through everything that you think that you know to see, okay, can I be 100% certain of it? The laziness thing brings me back to normal life. I'm like a prisoner who's enjoying an imaginary freedom while asleep. Getting back to this asleep thing. I happily slide back into my old opinions and dread being shaken out of them. And he goes to sleep. End of day 1. Okay. Now, a couple of things could be going on here. One, since he's not quite sure whether he's awake or asleep anyway, going to sleep is really not a big deal because maybe he's actually waking up, whatever. Okay, fine, that's possible. Okay. He may be so mentally exhausted that he has to sleep, right? He just can think no more. He's hit a wall. I'll work on it tomorrow. I'll try to figure out knowledge tomorrow. Presuming that even comes of that, we cannot be certain either, obviously, right? Or, and this is the early 20th century American pragmatist interpretation of what's going on here, Descartes not really doubting that this is all just one big thought experiment for Descartes. This isn't real doubt, because real doubt is felt. This is just all thought. Real doubt is felt, and haven't most of us, if not all of us, had a night where we have been so fraught with doubt about something that we cannot sleep? We would love to. We know we need to. We know we're mentally and emotionally exhausted and need rest, but we just can't, because we can't turn it off. The excessive skeptic in us just keeps flying and flying and flying. I cannot find that new perch to rest in. But that's the end of day 1. He goes to sleep. He wakes up day 2, invigorated, ready to fight the good fight, ready to find the basis for knowledge. So he thinks, what if? What if? Apart, this is page 25 then. Apart from everything I've just listed, how do I know that there is not something else which does not allow even the slightest occasion for doubt? Is there not a God, or whatever I may call him, who puts into me the thoughts I'm now having? Why do I think this? Since I myself may perhaps be the author of those thoughts. In that case, am I not at least something? I've just said I have no senses, no body. This is the sticking point. What follows from this? Am I not so bound up with a body and with senses that I cannot exist without them? We've already doubted the senses and how reliable they are. So if that unreliable, it seems I could probably be just fine without them. Later in the text, because in some ways, Descartes is the beginning of mind-body dualism. We saw inklings of it in Plato. Descartes really brings it to the forefront here. And he says that, yes, there's an interaction between the two, but my mind and my body are two separate things. That my mind is like the captain of a ship, and the body is like the ship. Now, the captain's probably going to go down with the ship, right? But the captain's the one that kind of guides the thing around. The captain could go on to captain another ship. So we think now, fast forward from the early 1600s to 2020, maybe 2025, maybe 2030. There are ideas out there that we could, download our consciousness into the computers, captain a different ship, right? This has real biomedical ethical ramifications as far as, how much of this can I change and still be me? It seems possibly all of it, right? I'm just be the captain of a new ship. Which then means when my heart stops, that's not really me dying, that I don't die until this thing does, until brainwaves cease. which obviously has beginning of life and end of life ramifications. For more on that, again, take Intro to Ethics. Especially for me, I focus on that quite a bit, but I'm sure everyone else is good too. I've just said I have no sense, no body. This is the sticking point. What follows from this? Am I not so bound up with a body and with senses that I cannot exist without them? But I have convinced myself that there is absolutely nothing in the world, no sky, no earth, no minds, no bodies. Does it now follow that I too do not exist? If I convince myself of something, then I certainly existed. If I convince myself of something, then certainly I existed. Even if I am merely a brain in a vat, being fed misinformation, there is still a me that is being fed that misinformation. I am my mind. That's who and what I am is my mind, says Descartes. Feelings and all of that, those are ancillary. Those are maybe accidental qualities or properties, to use Aristotelian language. Essentially, who I am is this thing. But there is a deceiver of supreme power and cunning who's deliberately and consistently deceiving me. In that case, I too undoubtedly exist if he's deceiving me. I'm a thing capable of being convinced, of being deceived. Of that I can be sure and certain, right? Not whether I am being deceived or not, but that I can be deceived, that I can be convinced, that I can hold beliefs, that I am capable of knowledge, perhaps. That I can find enough justification for. Because all of these things are mental things. Let him deceive me as much as he can. He will never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I think that I am something. As long as I think that I am something. So after considering everything very thoroughly, I must finally conclude that this proposition, I am, comma, I exist, is necessarily true whenever it is put forward by me or conceived in my mind. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I exist. As long as I think, I am existing. I am a thinking thing first and foremost. That's what I am. I am a thinking thing. Everything else then builds off of that. That's the thing I can be sure and certain of. That I'm a thinking thing. And as long as I'm thinking, I am therefore also existing. I think, therefore I am. Cogito, ergo sum. That's the thing that I cannot doubt. I cannot doubt my own existence. I may be able to doubt everyone else's existence, and we'll get to that in a second. But I cannot doubt my own existence. Why can I not doubt my own existence? Because in the very act of doubting, I am proving that I'm continuing to exist. I should probably do that. I feel like that's like a mic drop moment right there. In my very doubting, I am proving that I'm continuing to exist. It is irrefutable that I exist. That is 100% certain every single time. As long as I'm thinking, I'm existing. Notice again the biomedical ethical ramifications. Once brain waves have ceased, once Grandpa Jimmy is no longer thinking, once he's no longer a thinking thing, if Descartes is right, he's also ceased to exist. His body may still be there. The ship may still be there, but there's no captain. He's gone. Some people refer to these types of people as vegetables. They're in a vegetative state. They're more cabbage-like than person-like because they're no longer a thinking thing. Now, later in this course, and again, focusing more on the ethics course, I'll talk about personhood and some other ideas and concepts behind what it means to be a person, what it means to exist. But Descartes here is laying the groundwork for all philosophy to follow. Like I've been saying all along, what is it that philosophy wants to focus on? Thinking. This is why philosophy, Western philosophy especially, focuses on the cogito. More so even than the sum. They focus on the cogito. What does it mean to think? What is thinking? What are the things I think about? Because then thinking leads to things like knowledge and doubt and all of that stuff that we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about. Without a thinking thing, knowledge ain't possible. That's the building block. That's the foundation. So I had a student, this was quite some time ago now, it was in the summer, and my work attire, I'm not wearing a tie today, but typically, you've seen me typically, shirt, tie, slacks, right? Even in the summer, regardless of the temperature. Now, we'll get a little more casual maybe in these videos as we go, but for the time being at least, shirt, tie, long sleeves, rolled up maybe this far, no further. I finally, a few summers ago, one of those extremely hot summers, had a student ask me, Dr. Schrappe, how many tattoos do you have? The rest of the class laughed. I guess to them, this doesn't seem like a guy who would have tats. Would be all inked up, whose body is a canvas. But to this gentleman, he thought, surely since Schrappe is not exposing much, he's probably keeping covered quite a bit of artwork. So I jokingly said, I have only one. It's across the entirety of my back. And it says, cogito ergo sum, mother. And you can figure out how it finishes. Fast forward a few years, then I get a new cell phone. I use smartphone things because it takes better pictures. And so a friend of mine kind of dabbles in graphic design. And my wife approached him then to design, I guess it's called the skin, the back skin of the phone, right? Like a covering type thing to make it look, whatever. Personalize it, blah, blah, blah. And so he put cogito ergo sum and then put Rodin's thinker on there. So that it was on not my back skin, but on my phone's back skin. My wife and I thought it was funny. So, cogito ergo sum. I can be sure that I exist as long as I think that I exist. I'm a thinking thing. Not a feeling thing. Not a connected to others thing, a thinking thing. Here are some of the ramifications of that. If I can only be sure that I exist because I'm a thinking thing, I can't be sure about the rest of you. I cannot be 100% sure and certain that there are other thinking things. This is a philosophical position known as solipsism. And there are some thoughts out there that indicate that perhaps the extreme forms of autism are really extreme forms of solipsism. Why would I need to give you a hug when you don't really exist outside of my mind? Solipsism states, look, I can't be sure anything exists outside my mind. I might be making everything up. I can't be sure. Maybe other things exist. Maybe they don't. Maybe the universe exists because of me. Now, there's a whole section of our textbook, which is the mind-body problem and the problem of other minds and so on and so forth. Here's the best defense for other minds existing. This is the best one that we've come up with in over 300 years. 400 years, almost 400 years now. This is the best one we've got. Well, I know I exist, I know I'm a thinking thing, and I act in certain ways. Other people act in similar ways, therefore they must be thinking things too. That is baloney. That's horrible. That is horrible. Because if you're extensions of my mind, obviously you would act in very similar ways to me. They're extensions of my mind, right? How else would you act? Well, it seems that these things have free will and act independent of me. Well, sure, it seems that way. If you've talked to a good author, they'll tell you their characters that they've created that have come out of their mind also seem to make decisions on their own. The characters write themselves, so it seems. But in reality, they do not, because they're extensions of the author's mind. There really is not great justification for the existence of other minds beyond yours. Let's hope it's not true. There was a member of the faculty at Notre Dame quite some time ago who claimed to be a solipsist. So when the other philosophy professors introduced him, they said, here's Professor so-and-so, he's a solipsist. So we take very good care of him, because when he goes, we all go. Right? If he's a solipsist, then everybody else is an extension of his mind. So when he kicks the bucket, when he ceases to be a thinking thing, when he ceases to exist, boom, the rest of them all blink out of existence. Again, there's some interesting parallels with some strains of Hinduism that claim that reality, as we understand it, is really Brahma's dream. So when he wakes up, we'll all cease to exist. Brahma, the solipsist, or something along those lines. There are strains of Christianity, right, that God is great solipsist or something along those lines, that we're extensions of his breath or something along those lines. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. I know I'm existing. As long as I'm doubting, as long as I'm doing any mental thing, imagining, boom, I'm existing. Thinking, boom, I'm existing. Doubting, boom, I'm existing. Convincing myself, boom, I'm existing. Being convinced by others, boom, I'm existing. Anything mental is proof of existence. When you are asleep and you're not dreaming, not great proof that you're continuing to exist. There's a real frightening thought for you probably, right? Wait, do I cease existing while I'm asleep? If what I am is a thinking thing and I'm not thinking, maybe. But now I got to get to the rebuild. So the hard work now begins, right? We destroyed everything. We doubted everything. Great. We even found that thing that we can build on. Awesome. But now we got to rebuild all the stuff that we just doubted. We'll do that in part 2.